In this video, I'm going to talk about something called ego death and some signs that you might be experiencing it in your life. So sit tight. Welcome back to another video. My name is Jen. I help people reinvent their reality. Today we're going to talk about the ego and something called the death of the ego. Now, this isn't so much death in a physical sense because we can't actually, our ego doesn't actually die physically. It's always with us. But what ego death means, it's this transitioning from more of this left brain mentality, this logical side of us, this identification of self, this identity we have, okay, processed by our ego, to more of a right-brained flow state where we expand into a world of all possibilities for ourselves. We no longer identify with just these labels and this identification of self that we've always held on to for so long. So the benefit of going through something called an ego death, even though it sounds kind of morbid, is that we begin living life not through our ego, not from our conscious head. We begin living life more through our heart, more in a flow state. We begin expanding ourselves into our intuition, creative abilities, and yeah, a lot of people go through this, but there are some signs that you may be actually going through an ego death of some sort, and that's what I'm going to get into today. Okay, so the first sign, or one of the signs, is you may actually be waking up between 3 and 5 a.m. every single morning, or most mornings. So I'm going to bring in a little ancient medicine into this one. Now, you know, the organs of our bodies, the organ systems of our bodies, the energetics of the organ systems of our bodies, all function at an optimal level for 2 hours, portion of 2 hours for each day. Okay, so the 3 and 5 a.m. time is associated with the lungs. And this has a lot to do with the emotion of grief and sadness. So when we are going through some sort of ego death, per se, it's almost like we're actually going through the grieving process. We're actually going through the grieving process because we're grieving over this part of our identity, which we are now shedding off of us. Okay, we are no longer having the ego control us. It's no longer our master, right? So we may wake up at this time because we're actually going through the 5 stages of grief. Okay, the last being acceptance, accepting that we have shed our skin, we've shed this part of ourselves, we shed our sense of self. The thing that the ego does, it separates us. It separates us. And it creates this idea of polarization in our life. Okay, right versus wrong, black versus white, you versus me. But when we shift more into our right brain and we no longer identify or no longer let the ego control us, what happens is we realize that everything is whole. We are part of everything else is part of us. There's no longer this separation. Right? We've identified for so long with this part of ourselves that we go through a process of actually grieving. Like we've lost a physical part of ourselves. Okay, so we may be waking up between these times every single morning. That's something to watch out for. And number 2 is you no longer identify with things that you used to identify with or that you used to like. Okay, emotionally, you may start feeling a little flat. And the reason for this is that it's not because you just have no emotion and you're just like a zombie. The reason for this is that, you know, as we go through this grieving process and as we shed that part of ourselves, our identification as, you know, this special thing, we lose our special, you know, uniqueness per se. We lose our labels, what we've always known ourselves to be, our identity of self. We lose that. So we may feel like we are missing something, or we may even fall into kind of states of depression or states of sadness or states of feeling lost and confused because we've lost this something that we've had attached to us for so long. We've been attached to it for so long, okay? So that is why. Another sign is you may start to declutter your life, okay? You may start to declutter your house. You may start redecorating. So, it's about releasing attachments not only from the ego, but also from stuff that's physical around us. So you may notice that as you're emotionally detaching from this sense of self or your identity or what you've always, called yourself or labeled yourself as, the category you've always fit yourself into, just coming from your conscious, logical side. You may notice that you need to release some of the physical attachments in your life too. So this could be clutter around your home. This could be like a job you've held onto for many years. This could be a relationship, a person that you've held on to many years. You start decluttering. So the next sign is you begin tapping into your creativity a little bit more. Or you may turn inward a little bit more. You may not want to be around tons of people as you're going through this process because sometimes it can make you feel not so great, or like I said, make you feel flat emotionally. So you find ways to get into this more flow state with yourself, okay? You may want to paint, you may want to write, you may want to work on projects, musical projects or whatever it is. But you find yourself a little more introspective. So you're not so much going out into the world and going out socializing so much as you're turning inward a little bit more, because what happens when you are no longer letting the ego control you, it's no longer your master, the master of your life. You find that you open the door, or you find things or discover things about yourself that you maybe didn't know. Maybe you have a creative ability that you didn't really know, or as a kid, it's something you like to do, but now you're bringing it out of you because you've released all these attachments from you, and now you're able to tap into that creative ability and go inward. And which leads me to my next sign is that, your intuition becomes stronger. As you're going through this type of ego death, the intuition may get stronger. You may decide, or you may find yourself making decisions more out of your gut feeling and not so much out of your head. Because again, what does the ego do? It protects us, right? It's all about safety. And it wants us to just think from our left logical side. But as you're transitioning more or transforming yourself into this more right side state, more of a creative, expansive state where you're not creating this separation anymore, then you find that your intuitive abilities become more powerful for you, okay? And you can make decisions based off of gut feelings rather than just logical reasoning. All right, another sign is that you may have old habits and old perceptions start to pop up again into your life, but the difference is instead of letting them kind of take control of you, you're aware of them, you observe them for what they are. Because you know that you're making this transition into this more expansive state, more flowing state for yourself. So these are kind of like these old habits that didn't die or that are coming now to the surface. Because as we know, we have many layers to ourselves, to our personalities. And as we're kind of decluttering, or as we're trying to pick apart the pieces of ourselves, right, peeling the layers of the onion off, we find things popping up, okay? And also, it's the ego, again, trying to protect us. So as we're trying to gain control of it without it letting control us, we find that old habits pop up. We may start feeling critical or judgmental, or just these states that don't really feel great to us. But what that is, it's kind of like lingering stuff popping up, okay? But the difference is you learn to observe it for what it is rather than just letting it overwhelm you and control you. All right, and then the next sign is that you begin trying new things, opening the door to new possibilities. Because again, If you're no longer identifying with this sense of self that's separating you, that's putting you in this category, okay, that's creating all this polarization in your life, then you're open to trying new things. You may find that you become interested in things that you once weren't interested in. You may be interested in astrology or more spiritual practices for yourself. Or again, creativity. You may find that you have these abilities that you didn't even know, or maybe you realize you can sing or something and you never knew that, because again, you open the door, you open the window to more expansion in your life, because you don't have these artificial barriers anymore, right? That the ego tries to put us in, right? It tries to say, okay, you are in this little bubble here, and that's it. You can never go outside of this bubble. But if you're over here in more of the right brain, then there is no bubble. That's just artificial. That's something that we made up in a sense, right? An artificial wall for us. So we try new things. And the last sign that you may be going through an ego death is again related to these old structures that you used to have. You know, when you no longer have these barriers, it's now you're transitioning to a place where you're looking for more meaning in your life, okay? Where you're no longer concentrating on things like status or just superficial things in your life, stuff per se. You're looking for more meaning, more purpose in your life. And, you know, this can lead to us feeling lost and confused because sometimes you don't know which direction to take. But just realize that this is a normal process of transitioning into that more expansive state for ourselves, a more transparent state where you're living authentically as you, not as the labels or the categories that you've always been in, or this identification of self that makes you separate from everything else. No, you are part of the universe is part of you, you are part of everybody else is part of you. Okay, that's the difference. So essentially, possibilities are endless. But you know that you have something deeper within you, a purpose for living here, your place on earth, and you are trying to find that in a sense. And that's why you may get involved or interested in more spiritual practices and things like that. So these are just some of the signs that you may be going through this transition for yourself. You may be shedding some of the old layers off of yourself. You may be decluttering from your life. And, you know, it's not a bad thing. It's not a physical death. We can't actually get rid of the ego. I mean, it's there. But we can learn to make friends with it. And we can essentially control it, not let it control us, not let it rule our life. Because what happens when the ego rules our life, then we are constrained. It's almost like we have shackles on. We're confined, almost like this little prison. Not to make it sound like a really horrible thing, but we're confined to all that we know or all that we've always identified with. But if we shift ourselves to more right brain activity, more expansion, more flow state, more intuitive state, then we realize that there aren't any bars, there aren't any shackles on us to begin with. It's just a projection, okay, of what we've either just always identified with, always known in a sense, but they're not actually there. They're not physically there. That's only in our head. So with that being said, I hope this was helpful. If you thought so, please leave some comments below. If you've gone through this or are going through this, let me know. I'd love to hear your thoughts on the matter and what your experience has been. Also, if you haven't done so, please subscribe. I put out videos every single morning. And other than that, I will see you guys on tomorrow's video. So have a great one. Peace.